Hey guys, Mr. Passeri here with another exciting educational video for Google Classroom and the YouTube channel. Tonight we are going to be talking about the Constitutional Convention and the challenges that hindered the United States shortly after the Articles of Confederation were put in place. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns about the homework, which is pages 192 to 201, the posted pages that I put on for convention and compromise, please let me know. There has been an extension for the deadline for this because I have heard that kids are starting to get a little stressed out with the transition from the brick and mortar school to now doing learning online. So your new deadline is April 6th. That's posted in Google Classroom. So April 6th, 11:59 p.m. And you get a few more days to work on this. So good luck. Chill, but try. So that just have a good balance between being committed to doing your schoolwork, but also take advantage of being able to get a little bit of breathing room and not having teachers like literally looking down at you all the time, because now you're at home and you're not being forced to actually sit at a desk or forced to be in a classroom. So have a good balance of things, and don't hesitate to ask me questions. So wouldn't be a Mr. Passeri educational experience if I didn't force you to listen to Japanese pop music. So anyway, that's sold out. You should check them out. It's some good stuff. Anyway, so let's talk about the Constitutional Convention and the challenges facing the young United States. The big challenge here is there needed to be, after the revolution, the proper balance between freedom and authority, okay? And for a lot of people, the Articles of Confederation weren't really cutting it because there's going to be two major challenges facing the United States. One is going to be the economy is not going to be good because the United States just came out of a war. The United States is in debt after the war because wars cost money. States are not forced legally to pay taxes. There's all different kinds of currency flying around the states. There's not a uniform currency. And once the new government starts trying to flex its muscles and starts, repossessing people's land, forcing them to pay their taxes, then you're going to start getting violent uprisings, and people in the new United States, the average farmer, the common man, is going to start to view the new U.S. government the same way that they viewed the King of England, and people are going to start violently rebelling. So the combination of economic decline and violent unrest is going to lead there to be a new set of rules for the United States to play by, and we know that set of rules as the Constitution. And in order to get the Constitution in place, there's going to be a constitutional convention where the elite of the 13 colonies come together in Philadelphia to basically come up with a set of rules that still give people a degree of freedom, but not as much freedom as under the Articles of Confederation. So let's actually start talking about the challenges that are highlighted in your reading. So again, let's start off talking about economic depression, okay? And this is what the early United States under the Articles of Confederation is going through. And an economic depression is when your economic activity slows down and your unemployment goes up, right? The economy goes down. That means that there's not as many jobs because people can't afford to pay people. There's not as much money being made in businesses because no one can afford to buy anything. Farmers are hurting. They can't grow as much stuff. Farmers might be, trying to help out their own cause by borrowing extra money and going into debt themselves, and then they're not able to pay back their debts. and then they end up getting in trouble because they can't pay back their debts or can't pay their taxes because they're trying to borrow extra money to help stimulate the U.S. economy, but it's all, imaginary debt money, and then when it comes time to pay, they're going to be in a bad situation. And it's precisely this type of thing where farmers and former soldiers are going to be in situations that they're poor after the war and they just straight up cannot pay their taxes, but the government's in a situation where we have to start forcibly collecting taxes, and you're going to have these sides butting heads. And what's going to end up happening is in Massachusetts, you're going to get Daniel Shays, a former Continental Army captain, leading a rebellion of, really thousands of farmers to start capturing courthouses, to prevent farmers from getting arrested and jailed because they can't pay their debts. And also, they're going to start charging the armories, particularly in Springfield, Massachusetts, to get guns and ammo. I mean, guys, this should look a lot like what the colonists were doing to the British, except now the new citizens of the United States are starting to do this to their own government. Remember what Lenin, the Russian Soviet revolutionary, said, right? To wage the revolution is as easy as lifting a feather, but to enforce order after the revolution is as hard as lifting a mountain, right? So that's a paraphrase, but that's the gist of what he said. So these are the situations that are happening that are going to lead to a new set of rules for the new United States. Now, ultimately, Shays' Rebellion is going to be put down, but that is going to scare enough people, particularly the white, wealthy, educated, landowning lot of men, to say, you know what, we need something better in place than the Articles of Confederation. Now, there is a range of ideas among these more capable set of men, right? Thomas Jefferson is going to like the idea of revolution more than someone like James Madison or George Washington, but all those guys are going to own slaves. So at the end of the day, they're going to want to be the people making money and being in charge and recognize the need for authority over freedom. Now, some of you may be thinking about, well, what's the deal with slavery here? Because isn't this massively hypocritical to be having a Declaration of Independence talking about natural rights and having slaves? And the answer to that is yes, it is massively hypocritical, but I want to put you in the minds of people at the time to see how this does actually make sense to certain people. Okay, now a lot of the people like Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, James Madison, pretty much any educated person at this time read a lot of Greek philosophy. And the main Greek philosopher was Aristotle, who you went to for your political insights. Now, Aristotle had this idea of a three-tiered society. On the bottom were slaves that bore the burden of the society. In the very top were the people that Aristotle considered smart enough to run the society, the elite, wealthy, educated philosopher class. And then in the middle, you had the middle class that kept everyone honest, right? That kept the slaves in their place to keep them from going crazy and taking everyone's stuff, right? Because they can't be trusted to make political decisions because they're too unpredictable. And then you keep the elite from becoming tyrants, dictators, right? And that was Aristotle's idea. So in Aristotle's idea of a harmonious society, slavery was a component of that. Now, I personally disagree with Aristotle, right? But at the time, people looked at Aristotle and said, yeah, no, that makes sense. And so there were people who saw slavery as a perfectly coexisting part of a Republican, Democratic, in quotes, society. But not everyone, right? You had groups like the Quakers in Pennsylvania. Remember William Penn, your oatmeal dude, your Quaker Oats guy, right? The Quakers were very anti-slavery. They organized America's first anti-slavery society. You had northern states, 11 of the 13 states, right, already starting to put limits on the slave trade, either outlawing it or heavily taxing the importation of slaves. So there is a recognition that slavery is a problem in terms of how long do we really want slavery to go on, and is slavery really compatible with the values of the United States? Many said yes, but there was also many that said no, okay? And that tension is going to run right through the 1860s and ultimately be a huge component in the American Civil War. Now, it's important to note that African Americans at this time were starting to develop their own culture and cultural space and social space for themselves, because integrating with white people, they would not be treated fairly. So a lot of African Americans just kind of did their own thing amongst themselves if they were free. Okay, so let's start talking about the Constitutional Convention. Now, the big person who's going to be considered the father of the Constitutional Convention is going to be James Madison. And James Madison is going to be, paraphrased by me right now and quoted by more kind of radical historians like Noam Chomsky as advocating the idea that the opulent minority needs to be kept in a position of superiority from the unpredictable majority, right? And that is a really fancy way to say keep the rich, smart, capable people safe from the crazy masses, okay? That's basically what James Madison is thinking. And unfortunately, there is a good deal of elitism that still goes on today, right? There's this idea that people in certain parts of the country or people with certain levels of lack of a college degree or something like that are just too stupid to even be paid attention to. So elitism, unfortunately, is a component of thinking in U.S. politics right down to its very foundations. Now, democracy and balance and republicanism are also components in U.S. politics, and there's a lot of good to go along with the bad. And let's take a look at that in more detail now. So George Washington is going to preside over the Constitutional Convention, and he's ultimately going to become our first executive, our president. A convention is a meeting, right? You all know sometimes there's the comic book convention in town that I draw at. There's all kinds of different big club meetings, right? Those are conventions, right? But this, rather than being a comic book convention or a Magic the Gathering convention or whatever nerd thing I can think of, this is going to be about the wealthy, political-minded people from the 13 colonies, 55 to be exact, coming together to try to hammer out a set of rules that's going to be good for the country. Now, out of these people, only 3 are under 30. 26 are going to have college degrees. And this is going to be pretty much a boys' club here, right? A white boys' club. No Native Americans, no African Americans, no women. Okay? So this is also not open to the public because people wanted to be able to talk freely, right? They didn't want to have the common man kind of getting in the way of their dialogue amongst themselves, okay? Now, I don't want you to think that this is just a bunch of evil white old men coming together to find a way to exploit people. That's not what this is. They wouldn't think of it like this, okay? What they're trying to do is come up with a set of rules that benefits themselves, but in their mind also works for the common good of this new country, okay? That's the mentality of this time. Now, you have in the 13 states different amounts of people in different states, and we still have this today with our 50 states, right? You have certain states with more people than others. That is going to affect the way that you're going to want to set up your politics. If you're from a state with a lot of people like Virginia, you're going to want to favor representation of those states proportionally with the states with the most people get the most representatives. If you're from a small state like New Jersey, you're going to want everything to be nice and equal. You want all the states to have 1 or 2 representatives. Out of this is going to come the Virginia plan and the New Jersey plan. What the Virginia plan is going to do is try to create a political order like this. 2-house legislature that puts an executive in place, a president, and a judicial system. The 2-house legislature, the groups that make the laws, there's going to be a lower house and an upper house. The lower house is going to get elected by the people who have the right to vote, and the upper house is going to get chosen by the lower house. And both houses are going to have proportional representation. Okay? Now, the New Jersey plan is going to be like the Virginia plan, but not having the proportional representation. It's going to be more like this. 1-house legislature, 1 vote for each state. Congress can enforce taxes. Congress elects a weak president. That's the idea of the New Jersey plan. And ultimately, what you're going to get is the Great Compromise, which is going to lead to what we have, our 2-house legislature. We have the House of Representatives. We have the Senate. The House of Representatives gets proportional representation. The Senate gets the equal representation. In this case, every state gets 2 senators, but your amount of people in the House of Representatives is going to depend on how many people live in your state. Ultimately, we're going to get 3 branches of government: the legislature, the executive, and the judicial branch, and those are all going to balance each other out: Congress, President, Supreme Court. And this is going to be a result of the Constitutional Convention. The term compromise is also important because compromise is going to be an agreement between 2 or more sides, and you kind of come in and do something in the middle, right? I'm sure you and your friends have debated, what video game do you want to play? And someone's going to be like, I want to play Sonic the Hedgehog. And someone's going to be like, no, I want to play Street Fighter 2. And then you're going to compromise and play Final Fantasy VII because Mr. Passeri has the best taste in video games. Okay, so anyway, let's talk about an unfortunate compromise, but an historically interesting one nonetheless, and that is the 3/5 compromise. Now, the 3/5 compromise goes a little something like this. In the South, they want to count their slaves for purposes in congressional representation. So even though the slaves are treated as less than human, the South wants them to have full political representation because the mentality in the South would be you want to have the more representatives in Congress. And you can also try to be nice about this and say, yes, our slaves are property, but they're people too, and they deserve to have their head counted just like everyone else. Okay? In the North, that doesn't really need slavery because they don't have fertile soil. It's not a big part of their economy, and they can literally afford to be moral and ethical about things. Their whole thing is like, no, you're not playing this game. You're not going to have your slaves be treated as less than a citizen and then get counted as a citizen. So the compromise is this. Blacks are going to get counted as a fraction of a person. Slaves are going to be counted as 3/5 of people for congressional representation. And that is the 3/5 compromise. Now, finally, to balance all of this out, you're going to get a Bill of Rights, which we'll talk about in more detail in our next YouTube video after this assignment. And what the Bill of Rights is going to do is guarantee people core rights to balance out all the rules and structure of the Constitution so that your natural rights are ultimately going to be written on paper to be protected. Your right to free speech, your right to religion, your right to assembly, your right to press, and a whole host of others. Those are going to be in the Bill of Rights, and we'll study that in more detail in the very near future. So guys, that's our video. I hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions, again, don't hesitate to contact me or any of your other teachers because we all do like hearing from you. If you have, seriously, if you got a question for my mom, aka your English teacher, send her an email. You got a question for, me or Mr. Chapin, send us an email. So Remember, this is your homework is due on April 6th. Stay inside. Do not gather in large groups and spread coronavirus. Again, not that anyone out there, hopefully, of my students has this, but help limit the spread of this. So far, I believe we've got 10 people who have been diagnosed within in the county. That's up from 2. So do your part, and literally, I'm that teacher that tells you play video games, and video games are good for you. So now you literally have a whole host of people other than me telling you just chill in your house and play video games. You want to talk to your friends? Hit them up on your cell phone or play a video game with them on the line, and do that. Stay safe, relax, and stay focused on doing your schoolwork when you have to do it. And until next time, guys, I'm Mr. Passeri. You take care, and I will see you in the very near future. Bye-bye.